I'm Cynthia James, and this network is about changing lives one woman at a time.
Hello and welcome to Women Awakening. I'm your host, Cynthia James. I'm so grateful that I get to introduce you to fabulous women, women that inspire me, women that have taken control of their lives, women that are here in high service to humanity. I believe that they're way showers and they're change makers, and they're also here to invite us into a field of possibility and potentiality. So if one person can succeed, we can all succeed. If one person can heal, we can all heal. And so I'm really grateful. I do these every week. We're on all the platforms: Spotify, iTunes, iHeart, Spreaker, Amazon, and video on YouTube. Look for Women Awakening, Cynthia James. And you can also go to cynthiajames.net. There's a lot of material there and gifts, and you can also join my community. Today is a very important topic, I believe. We're going to look at grieving. And my guest is an authority, and she's amazing. Her name is Audrey White. She's the co-author of the new book, Grief Coaching, Paving a Path from Pain to Peace, 2023. She is the CEO of the Grief Coach Academy, #1 coach training program dedicated to training coaches how to help people through grief. And with her expertise in dealing with life setbacks, grief, and stress, Audrey's helped countless individuals find hope and healing during times of trauma and loss. She's had her own journey, and her passion for healing was born from her own journey of grief and loss. Audrey's journey is one of heartbreak, surrender, and perseverance to find the joy of living again. Audrey, thank you so much for being here.
Oh, thank you, Cynthia. It's such a pleasure and an honor to be a guest on your podcast, Women Awakening.
Well, I just want to start with how you grew up. It's very important for
Mhm.
me, for women to understand that, you know, we can start out here and we can end up here because life moves us, but there's always a
Yes.
beginning. So, how did your life begin?
Oh, I grew up in this little tiny town in northern Lower Michigan, on the shores of Lake Huron. I think there was maybe about 4,000 people in my town. Our town had the only stoplight in the entire county. Um, I think they've even taken that away at this point. But so I grew up. Um, my mother was from Texas. And she met my father when he was stationed in Texas during he was in the Air Force, and he moved her from Texas to Michigan, and and that's where I grew up. And I was the youngest of 3 kids. There was 15 years between my oldest brother and myself. And by the time my parents had me, they had raised 2 boys. They got to me, and it's like, "Oh, we always wanted a girl, but now we're kind of done." And so I really grew up more of an only child. My first memories of my brother, my oldest brother John, was him coming home from college, and he would come home, and we'd watch Sesame Street and Star Trek, and he'd play on my light bright and stuff like that. That's my first memories of him. And you know, my father was, he was an alcoholic. He struggled with alcoholism. My mother, very much a codependent.
Mhm.
Um, and I also experienced sexual abuse when I was younger by an older cousin. So, with all of that, I always felt like I was this outsider,
Mhm.
never really feeling like I belonged, um, really not having a safe place in my life. Home didn't feel safe, school didn't feel safe. Like my cousins, who that was where I kind of grew up, that didn't feel safe anymore. So I always felt I was on the outside of things. Um, Go ahead.
And were you well, I'm so grateful that you're sharing that because those of us
Mm,
who've had these kind of traumatic childhoods,
yeah.
I think it's a miraculous unfolding how we end up being these helpers on the planet, but I'm so
Yeah.
grateful that you shared that because I guess the first questions I want to ask you is who knew? Who could you talk to about what was happening to you?
Um, I didn't feel like I could. I didn't really have someone that I could confide in. And um, I even knew at a young age, like I never told my parents I was sexually abused by my cousin. I knew that they couldn't handle it. Like
Right,
this would just blow their world apart. And it wasn't something that what were they going to do? I mean, I
right,
knew it was going to blow up this whole thing. And I'm like, I, so I always kind of grew up as that caretaker for others, even when
right.
I was little. And so you have no boundaries. You have, you are the caretaker for the adults in the family. Um, it's taken a long time to get through all of that, the trauma, letting go of all of it.
Yeah.
Um, yeah.
Well, and so I will come back to this
Yeah.
because I know I want to talk about grieving because it's
Yeah.
part of the process. But when I was reading your bio in 2020, I mean, 8 family members left? I
Yeah.
mean, okay, so that's a very short period of time for that many people to leave. And
Yeah.
so were you spending that whole year trying to manage it?
Oh, yeah. I mean, the whole world was shut down in 2020. I mean, we shut down the beginning of March, and my cousin died like probably a week into COVID. Wasn't from COVID, but he had some health issues that we weren't aware of. So it was very unexpected. And then it was just like one after the other. A couple weeks later, it was my uncle, then my cousin's wife. I think she just died of a broken heart. She just couldn't
Mm,
live without him. I had another family member die. Um, and then the fall came around, and my aunt died. 13 days later, my mother passed. And 6 weeks later was her final sister. And then then my aunt's husband. So it was just like this consecutive loss after loss after loss after loss. Uh, and yeah, because during COVID, we couldn't fly, we couldn't get together, we couldn't grieve together. Um, it was this whole thing of how do you process this on your own? And you're
yes,
reaching out to family members, but it's all, you know, we were all so in our own little bubble that it was even hard sometimes to do that. Um,
100%.
yeah.
So then
And
in
I
20 go ahead.
and what I was gonna say though is that in 2020, when my mother passed, I had a miraculous experience with her death.
Mm,
Um, so many people were dying at that time and not being able to be with loved ones and having to say goodbye over the phone. My mother went into the hospital with pneumonia. The muscles in her throat had just stopped working.
oh,
She
wow.
couldn't eat, she couldn't swallow. And the hospital just kind of left us alone. They put us in a room, they shut the door, they let my brother and I be there 24/7. It was the most blessed time of my life to be able to have this time with my mother. And I was able to tell her, "Mom, you haven't eaten. You can't even swallow water at this point. We have a matter of days left. Are you ready to die?" And she said, "Yes." She was just almost enthusiastic about it. I think she was just like, I'm done. And thank you. It She was so grateful to have this experience of me being able to just say, this is what it is. We're at our final days together. And she kept saying over and over, like, I'm so like that when you have to die, this is the way to do it. To be
Yes.
surrounded with, by her children, and my brother and I were both there. And um we sang and we laughed and we cried and I heard stories I hadn't heard before. So that time was so incredibly precious. And to be able to invite this in for my mother, where there wasn't anything that she knew she was held, and she knew that we weren't hiding anything from her. Like, this is it, and it's okay. And it
It
was
is
such a beautiful moment.
it is such a gift. People don't even know, a lot of people are afraid of death, but there is something extraordinary about being with someone, ushering them to the other side of the veil and
Yes.
bringing love into that space. It's really beautiful, and I love that you were there, especially in a time when they were isolating everybody. I mean, what an amazing gift.
It truly, truly was. Yeah.
Well, so then I want to talk about 2022, cause, cause okay, so you've gone through all this, and now you maybe thinking you have a little respite, and then here comes 2022.
Yeah, I really was thinking like, okay, okay, I've got a break. 2021, my company that I was working for was acquired. So again, during COVID, you can't come together to say goodbye to your coworkers, to celebrate what you've done. By the end of 2021, I was exhausted. I was so burnt out. Emotionally, I had nothing left. And I decided to take some time off for myself. And I was very blessed to have the ability to do that. Um, so I took a few weeks off just to kind of come back to myself, to focus on my health, to focus on what I needed to do. And 8 weeks into, like at 6 weeks, I'm like, all right, feeling like Audrey again. This is good. And 2 weeks later, like 8 weeks to the day, March 21st, um, I got a message on Facebook in the evening from, it was my brother's neighbor, and she's like, can you please call me? And I just had this sinking feeling in my stomach, and I had called, and she said, I don't know how to tell you this, but they're both gone. And I said, she killed him. I know she killed him. And my brother was murdered by his wife of 42 years, and she committed suicide afterwards. And you know to go through that, losing um my brother, and we were so close, especially after my mother died. Um, it's something that you don't expect to have to go through in your life, you
Right,
know, and it's real easy to ask, why me? Why am I thrown into this? But the other question is, why not? You know, things happen all the time. Painful things happen all the time in the world. This is just part of my story now, and it's part of my children's story.
right.
Um,
So,
yeah.
so I want to know what you did to go through the grieving process, and how did that lead you to what you do today?
Yeah. Well, life is funny. I actually, in a very strange way, but in 2019, before all of this happened, I actually met the founder of the Grief Coach Academy, Aurora Winter, and I knew, like, I need to do this. I need to go through this
Mhm.
program. So I went through the program, and so having those tools, little did I know that that was going to be the foundation for me to get through everything that I was going to face, losing 8 family members in 2020, the murder of my brother. I had no idea that was coming. So I just thank the universe, thank source, thank God that I was put in that place. And um, as far as my own healing with my brother, you know, it you have the traumatic death, right? I didn't get to say goodbye to him. I had a lot of, why did he have to sacrifice his life? Like, why
Mm,
was his life sacrificed? Um, there was, I had lawsuits that I had to deal with that she had put in place before, you know, I was contacted less than 24 hours after I found out by a lawyer of hers. And I'm like, so in that way, it was really difficult because here I am in this emotional state. I'm barely wrapping my head around the fact that my brother's gone. And now I'm getting contacted by a lawyer. Like, what is going on here? And I'm so grateful that I've worked with lawyers my entire life. So I'm like, I need a team in Kansas, go, and I had people that helped me, and I'm so grateful for that. But it really put my grieving on hold,
Yeah.
because now I'm in fight mode. It's
Mhm.
not fight or flight. It's just like I have to fight this, and I don't know what I'm getting into. Um, and I also flew to Kansas where they lived, and I was going into this community where they had lived for 15 years. And they were active in Audubon there and
Mm.
different parts of the community. And I knew they were going to be grieving and they're not going to understand what happened. My brother was a very private person. They knew that she had mental health issues, but no one expects this to happen.
Right.
And the other part of it is that, the assumption was that this was, a mental breakdown when it was actually planned and premeditated and carried out.
Wow.
So I knew that going into that community, I had to put away my anger. I had to put away any type of response like that. And from my own belief system, what I believe is that anytime we're carrying anger against someone else, the sword doesn't fall on them, it falls on me.
Mhm.
And she had already taken my brother's life. I was not going to sacrifice mine by holding on to that anger. So it was a very conscious decision how I walked into that community and was able to hold space for them to speak the truth, but to do it in a way that was kind and loving and upheld my brother's memory because my brother was very much, you know, um, he was the kindest person you'd ever met. He talked to anybody, and he always he had this teacher mentality. So if you asked him a question, it was like, I want to, you're going to know why and how. And, it was never just like, oh, yeah, no, you're going to be there for 20 minutes because
Mm.
he's going to make sure you understood everything. And he also held tight to his vows and duty and honor. And he chose to be with this woman. He chose this in his life. And I know that if circumstances were different, he would have sacrificed his life. So knowing that and going through that process of really looking at that painful thought of he shouldn't have sacrificed his life to get to he made this choice a long time ago, Audrey,
Right. Right.
and it wasn't my life to live. And
Right.
that gave me that gave me some peace because I knew that this was his path.
Right. Very, very powerful. So, and when I started this, I said, grieving is very difficult for people.
Yeah.
Some people run from it, some people hide, some people act out, some people try to, drink through it, sex through it, whatever. So, so as a coach, as someone
Hmm.
who has a company that trains people in this, what do you think are the foundation things that help you getting people to be able to step into that field where they're willing to deal with it?
Yeah. I think everybody comes there when they're ready. Um, and sometimes you have to go into your cave. I know I did.
Mhm.
Like, I needed to go into my cave and and only have the people closest to me with
Mm,
me.
mm,
Um, because again, it was that sense of safety that I needed and protection. Um, and then when I was ready, it was time, and thankfully I had these tools for myself. So a lot of my stuff at first was walking myself through that process, that we use a lot in the Grief Coach Academy, which is called the Peace Method. And I think you know, grief can go on for so long.
Yes.
I mean, people can get stuck in this for years. I just had a gentleman reach out to me, and his son was killed 14 years ago. And just now is he starting to really be ready to own that. And I think of all the years that he lost. And, I encourage people to reach out when they're in grief,
Mm,
and they're searching. If they feel alone, there's community here for you. There's people who are willing and ready to hold you and listen to you and can hold your grief.
yeah.
And you don't have to be alone. And so please reach out. I mean, that's my big message to people is even when you're feeling like I don't want anybody around, I don't want, you know, I just need to kind of curl up. For me, it's that memory of my brother, of my parents. What would they want from my life? They wouldn't
Yes.
want me to hide. They wouldn't want me to, curl up and not live my best life. In a lot of
Ah,
ways. Sorry, yes.
no, that's okay. I was just saying, gonna say absolutely.
Yeah, yeah.
Absolutely.
And
Okay.
in a lot of ways, I feel like their deaths happened for me
Mm-hmm.
because I have this amazing, so many different ways that I've felt loss in my life, that I have the compassion and ability to hold that space for others. And I think that's what when we go through hardship, it really is about. It humbles us, it gives us compassion, and we're able to hold that hope and that knowing for others that they can get through whatever they're going through.
Exactly. So the book is about what?
So the book is about grief coaching and really how people can go through the process. And it outlines a lot of different processes that we use in the Grief Coach Academy, and it gives you vignettes of how we've worked with people over the years, with different types of losses. So you can people will be able to see like, oh, this is how it works, or identify like, oh, I really can identify with this person in this book or their story, and look at how it's helped them, and maybe it can help me as well. And so
That's
the grief
beautiful.
coach, yeah, it really is. And I love that it's outlined like that so that we can really um, touch as many people as possible to go, okay, well, maybe my grief isn't about losing someone that I love, but I've lost a piece of myself, or I've lost my, um, I'm grieving for the little girl and the
Mm,
childhood that I didn't have. There's so many losses that we experience in our lives. And going through the pandemic like we have, I mean, we've lost our sense of community, our social interactions, used to be so, they were just built into everyday life. And now it's about being more intentional about it. And some people are really still struggling with how to get back out and get in contact and what's safe and what's okay. And Um, so there's so many different ways that we experience loss in our lives. People who are losing their jobs, people who are retiring, even though that's a great thing, you're still losing that piece of yourself. So
yes.
the Coach Academy isn't just for people who have lost loved ones. It's about honoring and accepting and really expressing all the losses that we do have in our lives. And the more we can release that, the more love and joy and peace we have in our hearts to move forward
Yeah,
in life.
it's beautiful. So how do people find you and your book?
Well, they can find us at www.griefcoachacademy.com. You can reach out to me at Audrey at griefcoachacademy.com. And when you're on my website, you can sign up for there's free videos available. You can book a call with me. Every Wednesday night, I have an open session so that people can come in and we can just get to know one another, see what they're up to see if this is something that they want to, enter in and journey with me on.
Beautiful. Well, I ask the same last question of every guest. This show is called Woman Awakening. What do you think is the most important thing about women awakening on the planet at this time?
Mm, I love that question, Cynthia. And I think, mm, is to really awaken, it's laying down our fears. And in order to do that, I really feel like we need to move into them and
Mm,
embrace them and look at our fears, look at our losses, and understand that those are what gives us our strength. And there's so many people out there who benefit from each of us telling our stories. Every one of us has a story to tell. And it's so important to not hide that. And the more
yes.
we can open up and be vulnerable and be real, we can have that positive impact in the world. So just own who you are. And as this little tiny girl that didn't feel like she belonged anywhere in the world, if I can come on and do this
Mm.
and feel like if I can help one person, everything is worth it.
Well, Audrey, thank you so much. It's such an honor to be with you and to see what you're doing and
Mhm.
the incredible service that you offer.
Thank you so much, Cynthia. It's such a
Mhm.
pleasure.
All right, ladies. So I say the same thing to you every week in a different way. You know, your life is unfolding for a reason. What's happened to you before, what's happening now, and what will happen in the future. But the past does not define you. You get to open to the beautiful possibilities that live within you so that you make a difference on the planet. This is a time for women emerging on the planet. And I think that if you can step into your power with grace and with ease and with joy and with passion, the universe will meet you in powerful and dynamic ways. Thank you so much for being here. I'll see you next time.